Brother, how you
No,
doing?
don't just forget it now. Don't worry about it.
Hey, Jeff. Or is it Mr. Harris now that I forgot to say hi? It's Mr. Harris, isn't it? All right. That's a bright red shirt you got on there, buddy.
Yeah, we all had blue on last 2 weeks ago, so I decided to go with red this week.
I like the red. It's favorite color.
Sean outdid us. Sean outdid us too this week.
I know. I saw that.
Well,
He and John ties.
Yeah.
Doug, you can, whenever you got everybody here, it's live, so you can go.
Okay, thank you.
I'm literally right next to my closet. I was seeing if I had a suit jacket in there, but I think all my suit jackets are downstairs.
Hey, guys.
Hey, Don.
Hey, Dee, Jeremy, and Mark Labutus will not be here tonight.
And 4.
For streets, will I need to then get all 3 of the at-large to sit in then?
Yeah, I would think so.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, we can.
At-large people, are you cool with that?
I didn't. What did you say, Sean?
We'll sit in on streets because we have 3 people
With all 3 of them out.
Yeah, that'll work.
Okay, thank you.
All right, it is 5:45 on August 17th, 2020. I'm going to call this Finance Committee meeting to order. Present are council members Lang, Harris, Bubb, Marmee, and Fennell is sitting in for Blake. First item on the agenda is a request for appropriation in the amount of $3,851.58.
Doug, I'll speak to this. We had a medic that was involved in an accident and a claim was submitted through the city's insurance, and person sent a check to reimburse the payment we made to the ambulance company for the repairs done.
I'll offer a motion.
Second.
Got a motion by Bubb, second by Harris. Any questions and or discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by thumbs up. Those of the same sign. That motion passes 5-0.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda is a request for appropriation. Thank you. In the amount of $12,874.92.
The fire department sold some outdated equipment on Gov Deals, and we're just asking to have the Gov Deals monies go appropriated, go back in the equipment account.
I'll offer a motion.
Second.
I have a motion by Bubb, second by Harris. Any questions and or discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by thumbs up. Those opposed, same sign. That motion passes 5-0. Next item on the agenda is a request for appropriation in the amount of $10,210.55.
Doug, I'm not sure who's here to speak to this, but it does look like it's computer software for the requester is Marie Woods on here. I don't know who was to speak to it.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
Marie Woods is the jury commissioner. I don't know what the request is for. I assume it's probably for copies and postage because we are resuming jury trials and she needs those funds. I can't say that's the case, but I do know that she is the municipal court jury commissioner.
I'll offer a motion, Mr. Chairman.
A motion by Bub,
Second.
second by Harris. Do we have any questions or discussion on this one?
Hey, Doug, I'll do a little research on it and get back to you on it tomorrow.
Okay, if you could just have someone send an email to all of council, just to make sure that it was, that's what it's actually for. That'd be
happy to
great.
do it. I'll do it.
Thank you. Any further questions or discussion? Yes, Mr. Lang.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'll be okay with sending this on to full council, but yeah, I definitely want to understand what this is for before we can vote on it at council. So
Yeah, don't blame you.
Information by then, but
Right.
if we need to keep it moving, that's fine.
I'll do it. I'll get it out to you guys.
Yep,
Thanks, Dave.
sounds good.
Yep.
Any further questions or discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by thumbs up. Those opposed, same sign. That motion passes 5-0. Next item on the agenda is a request for a resolution appropriating monies for COVID-19 pandemic-related expenses of the municipal corporation.
Mr. Chairman, I can speak on this. As you know, the city's receiving $1,393,000 that's COVID related. And this has to be encumbered before October 1st or we lose the money. And this legislation allows it to be placed into a contingency fund and in a special COVID relief fund. By being in a contingency account, it can be moved later on. So we don't spend money out of this account. This just literally will appropriate it. So the administration will come to you later with a plan on how this is going to be spent. It also needs to be expedited.
Okay, so you're telling me that when it goes into this contingency, before it can be moved, council will have to approve the movement and where it would go to into the different accounts?
No, it can be moved just by a simple transfer. The administration will just advise you on how it's going to be spent. It hasn't been determined yet, but we have to have it appropriated or we're going to lose it. Okay. So this is the quickest way of doing it.
I know, but can we move it into something where council has to approve the expenditures and where it goes to and how it's being spent?
That would have to be a specific account. And that's the difficulty in it right now because it's not broken down as to how it wants to be spent. So if council wanted to do that, you would have to say where you want it to go and what particular account it would be going into. This just allows it to be appropriated so we don't lose the money.
Okay, I'm not comfortable just having that kind of money just given the checkbook without council having some kind of say in where it would be spent. $1.4 million is a lot. We've heard different entities come to us and asking for funds from that. And if we pass this legislation, then we would have no say who would or who would not get that and where it would go to. That's
Well,
just my opinion.
And that's fine. It just would have to be broken down into what account it's going into. And if you're going to do that, it has to be finished and appropriated before October 1st. We don't have to spend it. We just have to appropriate it by October 1st.
All right. Yeah, because otherwise we have no say in where it's being spent. Mr. Lang?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess maybe this is a question for Director Sasson. I'm looking in particular at Section 2 of this legislation, which authorizes the mayor to make transfers. Could we make an amendment to that Section 2 that would require further involvement from the council to transfer those sums?
I think the answer to the question is probably more that, and I think I'll need Mr. Johnson to weigh in on this, but probably more that if you wanted council to have the authority over the final authority, essentially over the spending of these funds, you could probably get by with simply eliminating Section 2. That's language that I basically pirated from previous legislation that I think Mr. Marmy will remember when we had a new software system put in place and we had year-end transfers that needed to be made because sometimes a salary account or something would come up $100 short. And rather than making Mr. Johnson come back to council to do that to balance by December 31st, we enacted that piece of legislation back in 2013. This language was pirated from that to allow a similar process to go forward. In part, I think the theory was because of the urgency of the need that these COVID mitigation expenditures brought with them. So that's why I put that language in there, was to allow the administration a more of an ability to respond rapidly when a need arises regarding a COVID mitigation issue. So I'll defer to Mr. Johnson on whether what I'm about to say is correct or not, but if council wants to control all of the money that's spent out of there, I think we could just eliminate Section 2. I will add, though, that your concern being checks and balances, it may not be council exercising those checks and balances, but any expenditure over $30,000 would have to be reviewed and approved by the Board of Control. Any expenditure over $75,000 would first have to be bid unless council waived that bidding. So that would involve council action there and would also require oversight and approval by the Board of Control. So there's a little bit of, even in that process, a little bit of council oversight and some oversight from the Board of Control. But again, I'll defer to Mr. Johnson on the removal of Section 2.
I suppose that would be okay. I'm just looking at it from an accounting standpoint. In order to spend the money, it has to be appropriated into a particular account. Council does the appropriation, so whoever determines how the money's to be spent will have to take steps to have it appropriated. My point is only appropriating it so we don't lose the money. I really don't have a say in how it's spent. Mr. Sasson, as long as you feel that's legal, I suppose we can mop up later to make sure it complies with various accounting requirements.
Well, I'm not as concerned about the legality, quite honestly, as the accounting. And, I don't understand municipal accounting, so I defer to you on that. I don't know if we pass Section 1 and place these funds in a COVID-19 contingency fund that's numbered there in Section 1. Does that require further action from council before the funds can be spent? That's the answer. I don't know. So I don't think it's illegal. I think
if it's appropriated into this contingency account, as the legislation says, it can be spent as soon as council passes that appropriation. Somebody has to say where to move it. We can't spend it out of a contingency account. We're not allowed to. I don't even know if our software would let us. Whoever comes up with a plan on how to spend this, it's not up to me. Just let me know where to put the money, and I don't have a problem with it.
So if I hear you correctly, Mr. Johnson, you're saying that if we pass section 1 of this legislation, place these funds into that 5299 account, that those funds would then be appropriated in the sense that we would not be losing them, but it would still require council action to actually spend them?
It's my understanding if it's appropriated into this contingency account, they can be transferred into some type of expense account and then expended at that point. This is just getting it appropriated and holding it. Can't be paid out of this account. It has to be moved somewhere. The way our system's set up now, all somebody has to do is write a transfer request and we can make the transfer. Council wants to add some kind of language that would require their involvement. That's okay with me. So I don't know if you want to discuss this with the administrator. I don't know. It's up to the administration to determine how we're going to spend this money, in my opinion.
Okay, so Steve, let me ask you this.
Mhm.
If we were to just appropriate it into the unappropriated balance, then it will require council action. Is that not correct?
It's in the unappropriated balance right now. This appropriation is getting it out of
Oh,
there.
it is.
If it's in the unappropriated balance, it has to move out of there before October 1st. Now, this isn't the unappropriated balance of the general fund. It's a special COVID relief fund.
Correct.
So, yeah.
Mr. Chairman, if I could say something. Doug?
Sure.
Hi. Yeah, we were 3 weeks out.
Yes,
I mean, the process of
go ahead,
trying to
Mr.
spend this correctly with little guidance from the state or even the feds, we just want to be sure we're moving in the right direction. We're getting closer all the time. We want to be sure the city is taken care of. I mean, obviously, we're not going to be able to spend all the money within the city, meaning city government. And we're getting input from the outside. I would ask, and this is a time factor here, really. So I might ask that if council would pass it, you're not just tonight, you still have to go to council, which is 3 weeks away since we have an extra Friday. And we'd be happy to give you a roadmap or a game plan at the next council meeting when you're sitting there to approve it so that you'll know where those monies will be going. And I mean, honestly, if we don't, then you don't pass it, I guess. But we at least the time frame is kind of a tight crunch to be able to push this off any further.
Mr. Chair, if I could.
Yes, go ahead, Mr. Lang.
Yeah, I think what I'd like to see is at a minimum some rough outline of a plan for how we're going to spend, and I think ultimately, I think it goes to the mayor to figure out what that plan is going to look like. But before I'd be comfortable passing this on, certainly at full council, I'm not sure if I'm comfortable passing it on to full council without any kind of a roadmap for how we're going to do it. I think we certainly could use Rule 11 if we needed to pass it quickly, but I feel like there's some pieces missing as far as a plan for how this money is going to be spent. We have till October 1st to encumber it, which gives us still plenty of time into September. There's 2 meetings in September. If we needed to expedite it, I'd be okay doing that to meet those deadlines. I guess I'd put it back to the mayor as to when you're going to have a good plan for how we're going to divvy this up and kind of outline the expenses that the city has seen so that we can see what amounts would be available to other organizations. Because I've received a number of requests and follow-ups from people. I think they've all been summarized nicely there by the clerk. So I just want to be able to articulate to folks, what kind of funds might be available for some of these other needs that are competing for this money.
Sure. If I might respond to that, and I really think probably within 3 weeks, the state, we sent emails out to the state. There's a lot of gray areas. We want to be sure there's the right things we can and can't do with it. They have about 4 people or 5 people answering thousands of emails. It takes several days to get replies. So it's just going through it. The other thing we want to be just careful about too, we want that as precise as possible, which takes a little more time, the allocations, the separations, because if council passes it within certain segments and we don't, that's going to earmark us, we don't spend everything in that segment, then that money is not going to be able to be moved into another segment. There wouldn't be time, and there would be unspent money that maybe could help the community. So that was only the concern. But I think probably within the next 3 weeks, again, with 24 departments across the city, they've never had to think of in this direction of how to use money to make it a safer environment for the citizens that visit us, plus our employees. So it's just taken, a little more time. Again, it's a lot of money in a short time anyways, but whatever council's comfortable with, I would say we could probably give you a game plan at the next council meeting. If you want to get this out of committee, and we can talk at council about it, but you can handle it any way you want.
Yes, Mr. Bob.
Yes, excuse me. I might just make a recommendation that we go ahead and pass it out of committee this evening, and then within 3 weeks, if there's not a plan that council is comfortable with, we can always go ahead and table it later. But I think, again, the fall is fastly approaching here, and I would have no problem doing that. And then, in 3 weeks, if council's still not comfortable where these funds are all going to be allocated for, we could table it at that time. So with that, I'll offer a motion.
Second.
Okay, I've got a motion by Bob, a second by Harris. Questions and or discussion? Mr. Lang.
Yeah, so I appreciate the thoughts. I guess I'm not totally opposed to sending it on. I do think we need to remove section 2 before we send it on, and we can address that at council when we've got a plan we can attach to fully articulate how it would be spent. So with that, I'll make a motion to remove, to amend to remove section 2.
I have a motion by Lang.
Mr. Chairman, can I ask a quick question before I would second that?
Well, let me get a second first.
Yeah. Okay. I'm sorry. Go ahead. I'll second that.
I'll second the motion. Okay, what's your question then, Ryan? Go ahead.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. I just was curious. The mayor had popped on here after we had spoke about that. Just wanted the administration's input on section 2 regarding that. If you had anything to say on that, Jeff.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, again, coming out of tonight, it doesn't give any more power or less to that, whether you remove it or keep it. You still have to pass it at council. I mean, and you can amend it at council or, do what you want. In other words, it's going to take your action twice at least with a waive rule, really. So I don't know that, pulling it tonight isn't any different than pulling it 3 weeks from now, but that's entirely up to you guys. You may want, if we give you the allocation, the potential for us to be able to move some of it with input afterwards, just to make sure we spend as much as possible. So I guess that's entirely up to you. You can pull it, pass it. We still redress it in 3 weeks. You can put it back. You can leave it out. You can leave it in now, pull it out in 3 weeks. I guess to me, it still takes your vote again at council for this thing to be, or even section 2 or any of the sections to be active. So I kind of don't care either way. I mean, I guess I still in 3 weeks, we got to talk about it. And you've got to pass it, whatever form it's in.
Yeah, I'll kind of give my input. One thing, if we don't hear anything until that meeting in 3 weeks, I don't know if folks will be comfortable to expedite it at that meeting that evening, even if we talk about it in committee or on council. So, if we don't hear, a complete, or I don't know if it would be prudent to just have something emailed to us as far as the game plan ahead of that meeting. And then that way folks can start asking questions even before the meeting, if they have some. And then, because I wouldn't feel comfortable expediting it on that first meeting in September if, there's still questions out there.
Yeah, and I can address that. I'm fine with that, Mr. Chairman. The other piece that's kind of going through my head,
Okay.
I guess, we're doing a lot of different things. People are getting COVID dollars from a lot of different angles. And we're also trying to do our due diligence and they're all asking from all the areas, from all the pots. And we just really don't want a single entity to receive, say, double and someone else to be left out. And it takes a little due diligence to do that. The county has some money. There's money specially formulated just for schools that we're not totally privy to, but we kind of have to do some research to find that out. We got a letter as recently as this past week, as I think you've seen copies of it, from our new school superintendent, Newark City Schools, David Lewis. And it was asking for money being used in a different way than before when they were on council a few weeks ago. So there's still a lot of moving parts to this, and that's why we don't want to. We didn't want to do it too quick, and that we couldn't have backed it up too much here. Maybe one council meeting, but even with that, I think we're rushing at it a little quick if we do it that way. So I'm fine with that, and I'm fine to give you a plan ahead of time and where it looks at, and about what that allocation would be. I think across the board, and again, what's prudent for both the city of Newark and what's prudent, the employees and the government, and what's prudent for the population out there that's been at risk through this. It takes a lot of work to spend that kind of money, but we want to do it and do it right.
Yes, Mr. Lang.
Yeah, I guess just a quick follow-up, and I completely appreciate the sentiment there, Mr. Mayor. There's potentially additional expenses coming too, right? So I don't know that in 3 weeks we need a plan for how every penny is going to be spent. I think just having some articulation of, okay, generally speaking, we're going to put some money towards these organizations. We've already incurred, this amount for the, different first responders, things like that. The city's already incurred salary expenses, different capital expenses we've seen. So I think it's really just about getting some kind of outline together so that we're able to answer questions around, okay, here's generally speaking where the Newark portion of the COVID money is going to go. And again, understanding this money covers potential expenses through the end of the year. So I don't know that the city's expenses are fully known yet or will be fully known for some time. So, I don't know that we need to spend every penny of that and figure that out in the next 3 weeks.
Okay.
Yeah,
I appreciate
Bob,
that.
did you have something?
Go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up with one comment, just to the encouragement to administration that any of these third parties that are asking for funds, I certainly hope there's a real tight plan in place to account for every dollar. From my reading on this situation, if every dollar is not accounted for, the city's going to be held responsible. So I'm just offering my encouragement that there's a plan in place, whether it's within the city or, from these other entities that are getting this, that we're not on the hook down the road.
Well, and I'd agree. That's something, obviously everyone understands, and I sure don't want to be coming to you, in a year and saying, hey, we got to pull $200,000 out of the general fund because something got thrown out. And that's where we're really doing our heavy due diligence. And, when we give it out as a subrecipient grant, there is limited regulation we'd have over that a little bit. If they're a nonprofit that can prove to us that they've had expenses related to that. And again, it has to be for this period of the virus. It can't be for next year. So people can't be buying for ahead of time. That isn't the intent. When it passes out of Congress and passed through the state, and you know how all of us politicians are, we put all bells and whistles on things, and it makes it a little more challenging sometimes to satisfy those requirements. And the Office of Budget Management in Columbus doesn't have a whole lot there. They're telling us, they're not giving us a firm yes or firm no on some things. They're saying, well, that could be and that could not be. And, it's kind of a little tough. So we're trying to do a little more due diligence, reaching out to other communities and seeing if there's some precedents out there and seeing the tolerance for that. Because there's a lot of gray areas. There are obvious areas that are simple, but there's some gray areas. I've been in several meetings, several seminars with this, and some people are saying, well, how in the heck could anybody spend that much money when you're only buying masks? And I'm being a little facetious, but if you can't spend it on bigger dollar items. So, and then each week, I think when I talk to people, we find out, hey, I never thought about that, of a way to maybe make City Hall a little safer for our employees, make the fire department safer. A city like Columbus, God forbid somebody catches the virus, and they've already quarantined, I think, 31 firefighters they did a couple months ago. We can't afford that. We can't afford to quarantine 10. So we have to be really careful and go some little different angles, and that's good discussions with the chiefs. And so with that, it's just taken a little more time to do the due diligence. So I'm happy to get a plan together in the next couple of weeks here, which was all the plan anyways. Get it out to council ahead of the council meeting, answer any questions you have, and then you could have this legislation presented to you to pass it in expeditious factor. So thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions or discussion? We have an amendment on the floor right now. Any questions on the amendment? Seeing none, all those passing this on to full council. Any further questions or discussion on that? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by thumbs up. This passes on to full council 5-0. Thank you very much. And with that, the Finance Committee meeting stands adjourned. Next up is service.
Hello, everybody. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
All right. So I will call the Service Committee meeting to order. Those present are I'm sorry. Those present are myself, Jeff Rath, Jeff Harris, Spencer Barker, Ryan Bubb, and Sean Fennell will be sitting in for Jeremy Blake. Up first, we will consider resolution number 20-59, a resolution creating a designated outdoor refreshment area for downtown Newark and enacting regulations with regard thereto. So who's going to kick off the party on this one? Mr. Rhodes?
Jeff, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Tonight we have the consultant that's doing the work on the Adora for us, Shannon Fergus. She's here to make the presentation about the Adora. So I'd ask that you direct your attention to Shannon.
I appreciate that. Shannon, welcome to the Service Committee, and thank you for taking time out tonight to talk with us. Before you get started, I want to make sure everybody on the committee actually has the presentation. I know it was emailed to us a while ago. We also got a copy of the application today via email, as well as exhibits 20 through, I'm sorry, scratch that. Using two screens on a laptop is not the easiest thing. But we had got our copies of all of our exhibits. So has everybody got that? Thumbs up. Awesome. All right, Shannon, you have the floor. Shannon, we can't hear you.
Sorry, thank you. Can you hear me now?
Absolutely, thank you.
Okay, it doesn't look like I can share the presentation, so kind of, bear with me as I go through it. So thank you all for having us this evening. As Mr. Rhodes said, we've been working on the Adora in conjunction with NDP. So first I'll just do a little bit of an overview of Adora. Adora allows establishments to have outdoor dining and alcohol in the public right-of-way abutting their properties without the need for fencing. So basically what it does is it allows you to have a patio without requiring fencing. Very basic. The other thing it allows to happen is for patrons to legally walk around the designated area with an alcoholic beverage that has been served by a liquor permit holding establishment within that district during special approved events. So they can't just go around and hold them, do it. It's not all day, every day they can walk around with alcohol. Most of the time, the DORA is only allowing that outdoor dining situation without the fencing, but we'll go through that. So the benefits of Adora: no need to build fencing for a patio, which helps remove obstructions in the public right-of-way, creating a friendly and inviting atmosphere. As I said, no need for fences, which are can obstruct, cause issues for cleaning and snow removal. And a lot of cities within Ohio have reported that with their DORA, they have seen an increase in revenue for the businesses. The other thing that isn't on this slide, but I think is important, is that, during COVID, I think it's very important for businesses to be able to offer as much outdoor dining as possible, so folks are comfortable, attending those establishments and being able to have those patios outside and be able to serve alcohol on those patios without having to invest in a bunch of fencing and things like that is really important right now. So now I will get into the details about this, the specific DORA we've come up with. The application that was submitted to you all is not like set in stone. So, you all as the committee can make comments, and we can kind of make changes based on those comments. So this is the current boundary that we came up with. There are only certain permit holders are allowed to be part of the DORA. Those include A's and D's and C's. And so here highlighted are all of those permit holders who have qualifying permits within the boundary. And we included all of them that are in the boundary within the DORA. Here's a list of those eligible establishments. I won't read through them, but here they are. And this is within the current boundary that you just saw. The proposed hours for the DORA, the way that, NDP is kind of proposing that this DORA be set up is that mostly it is used just for the patio situation that I discussed. On Sunday, it would be open from that drinking on a patio right outside the establishment would be allowed from 10 a.m. to 10 p.m. Monday to Thursday, 11 a.m. to 10 p.m. Friday, 11 a.m. to 11 p.m. Saturday and holidays, 10 a.m. to 11 p.m. The big changes are basically just, during the week, we know restaurants close earlier, hence the 10 a.m. closing time. And then on Saturdays and Sundays, we allowed the DORA to open a little earlier so that folks could, have those brunch cocktails that people often have on Saturdays, Sundays, and holidays at restaurants. I just found a typo on this. Sorry about that. But the DORA for the events, no specific events have been proposed. What we propose happening is that the event organizer apply to the DORA board to have their event included as a sip and stroll event, so that all board members, kind of come to a conclusion that yes, this year this event can be included. That way, the application doesn't somehow kind of hold you hostage to having to allow a certain event to have it every year. It's an event by event basis. So to participate in Adora, there's an onus on the participating businesses who would like to sell the Adora beverages. They have to submit an outdoor dining site plan to the city that then gets approved by your zoning department. They are required to purchase boundary signs, 2 signs that mark the boundary of their patios. And those signs are then used during those sip and stroll events. They get rolled out to the outer boundaries of the DORA to act as that signage for the whole DORA during the sip and stroll events. They're required to purchase clear plastic cups that will have the DORA logo, which we'll show here in a minute, from NDP, and each establishment will have a color assigned label on that cup. That way, in the event of litter, things like that, you kind of know where that cup came from. It also allows establishments to have you, that way if I try to walk into River Road with a beverage I bought at Barrel and Boar, River Road can be like, oh no, you need to drink the rest of that before you come in here because you need to purchase our own beverage in here. So it stops me from getting a cheaper drink somewhere else and bringing it into another establishment, so that all the establishments are kind of playing fair with each other in terms of sales. We're also requiring establishments to sell wristbands on days of Civinstrel events. Serves two purposes: a little bit of revenue for the Dora for any additional sanitary and police presence that is going to need to be present, and also make sure that anyone kind of walking around with a beverage in hand, we assume that those people have been ID'd by an establishment before they were sold a beverage. So it serves those dual purposes. And then there's door signage that they will be also required to have, that I will show in a minute. So I'm going to go through each of those items real quick. Outdoor dining site plan, they have to attain a right-of-way permit and meet Newark's codified requirements for that site plan. The permit review will ensure that there are adequate pedestrian passageways and that ingress egress for emergency services is adequate. So just like any other, kind of zoning review that happens for a dining area that would have a fence. The signage plan, this is the sign we came up with, and this is also kind of the Dora logo that you saw in the exhibit A of the application. So two signs, we looked up the cost. It seems that the cost would be about $100 per sign. So establishments would need to spend about $200 on signage. This is the cup. Again, it's just a clear plastic cup. We're thinking that there might be one other cup available that is kind of more wine glass shaped that establishments can choose to use, but these cups would need to be, again, purchased from NDP. I don't have a photo of a wristband, but again, we'll have a wristband with that same logo on it for actual Dora events. And then this is the door signage. Sorry, I'm not sure why this please dispose guy didn't come out right, but there's kind of three signs that we intend to use. One kind of sign that says, hey, a beverage is sold here. One that for the retail establishments and other establishments that are operating where you could walk in with a beverage but aren't allowed selling a beverage, they can have a bring it in sign. And then any of those businesses can always say, hey, yeah, technically you could bring in a beverage, but we don't want you to bring in a beverage. So they can display a please dispose sign. So if anyone doesn't want you bringing in an alcoholic beverage to their establishment, it's front and center. The sanitation plan is that outdoor dining tables are required to be bussed by establishment after each patron departs. Trash receptacles will be emptied before and after each special event, with additional receptacles placed as needed, and that responsibility would be bared by NDP. And same with if the city determines or the Dora board determines that for a special event they would like additional special duty police officers or public service safety workers, NDP would also bear that cost. So a little bit of that, those wristbands are kind of helping to offset some of that cost for NDP. Administration of the Dora, the sanitation plan will be executed by existing public safety personnel, with any additional costs paid for by NDP. Permit reviews will be executed by existing city staff, and operational tasks for the Dora will be executed by NDP as overseen by the Dora board, which right now we have showing, which this can change, but our first thoughts were safety director, service director, a mayoral appointment, an appointment from NDP, and an appointment from the CID. The application process, which we're currently in, the executive officer, go ahead.
You're doing a great job, and really, Zappa is full of information. I wonder, before we get into the application process, you've gone over a lot of information. I wonder if we could pause. If anybody has any quick questions on anything that she's gone over so far. Spencer?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Shannon, again, thank you for all the information. I do just have some questions. So on the
Spencer, before I let you go on, I know
yeah.
there's a lot of questions that we have about the overall program. Right now, I want to remain specific to the information that she's covered so far.
Yeah.
And then we can hit her with other stuff later. So if that's the case, go ahead.
I had a question about on the patio hours on this Sunday, and you had mentioned cocktails. And my understanding from researching Adora and discussing with a liquor attorney and a distribution company owner was that hard liquor was not part of Adora. Is that correct, or is that incorrect?
I believe that that is incorrect. I have not heard that hard liquor is not part of the DORA.
Okay.
I might be wrong, but I have not read that anywhere.
Okay.
Emily, Emily is one of our staff working on this with us. Emily, have you heard that anywhere?
I have not. I'm gonna pull up the permit, all the permit descriptions right now just to double check, but I believe hard liquor is covered.
Mr. Sasson, did you have a comment on that?
Well, I was just gonna advise Mr. Barker that the qualified permit holders are only permit holders with A and some D permits. I don't have all that permit list in front of me today, but if you email me tomorrow, I can tell you what each of those liquor permits allows a holder to do. I just don't know that off the top of my head. There's about 8 or 10 permits that are permitted in Adora. I don't know what the extent of that.
Mr. Marmee?
Yeah, thank you. The comment about current like enforcement and things like that with the trash, is that, I mean, as far as enforcement of this, is it going to be up to the Newark Police Department? Who's going to actually be there kind of enforcing or handling the complaints, if there are any?
I don't want to speak for NDP, so Sherry or Fred, who are both on from NDP, please tell me if I'm wrong. But the idea is that Newark Development Partners is kind of taking ownership of that. Sherry, do you want to? Sherry or Fred, do you want to?
Yeah, I mean, my understanding was, this is Fred. My understanding is that we are going to take ownership and oversee it and work with the safety director, work with with David Rhodes and his people on keeping everything cleaned and evaluate. I think this evaluation process, but it's definitely the right thing for the community and for the increasing the size of the patios for space for everybody to survive, especially during this COVID situation.
I would just add that just like the CID does right now, where we hire off-duty police officers for parking enforcement and safety patrol, we would do the same for special events. So we would have additional officers that would be managing the event.
Awesome. Shannon, so if you want to continue with the application process and I know you're on a roll. I hated to stop you, but go ahead.
No, that's fine. Yes. So it's just, it's pretty quick. We're in the application process right now. At the beginning of the month, the application was submitted to council by the executive office. Council has 45 days to public file notice of the application, which you all did do. You did 2 public notices and notified the public that this hearing was the public hearing for the council that ran in the newspaper 2 weeks in a row. 30 to 60 days after that notice, you must approve or disapprove that application by resolution, the full council. If you do approve it, liquor control is notified and automatically changes all liquor permits within the boundary to reflect DORA status. And they have a pretty good, they've sent us all the materials we need to notify them of that and how they like to receive that notification. So, and we would take care of that with NDP. And that is the extent of my presentation.
Wow, I stopped you before the last page. I apologize.
Fine.
Mr. Sassen.
If I could just follow up to Mr. Barker's question. Intoxicating liquors permit holders are included as a qualified permit holder. So mixed drinks would be included in this.
Okay. So Shannon, thank you. That was very thorough. Do we have anybody else that's going to present anything else? Sherry, Fred, Emily, do you guys have anything else that you want to add?
The only thing on this that I really would like to add is,
you got to unmute Sherry if you want to go first.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Fred.
Oh, okay. The only thing I really want to add is the important component to this is not walking around town with an open container, because we can limit those number of days. We might find out we don't even want to have one of those days. But the important part is opening up that patio, getting rid of the clutter of fences and stuff in front of the establishments now. It makes it easier for keeping downtown clean. And that's the one part I really want to stress.
Okay. Sherry, you had something to add?
Yeah, I was just going to say that there are several other communities, and Shannon could probably speak to this, that have Doras and have been very successful at it. So we are not trying to make Newark a guinea pig for it. We have really changed a lot of different things to tweak it for our purposes that other communities don't do. So we really have done our homework on it, and it really is to help the businesses. That's the bottom line. That's why we wanted to get it done, especially during this pandemic, to be able to help them more. And if we can have, some other events, sip and strolls, maybe Final Fridays, whatever it is, to me, that's icing on the cake. But that wasn't the sole reason to have the Dora. Really, it was to help the current businesses.
Sure. Shannon, have you been?
And Newark Development.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Sherry.
I just want to say Newark Development Partners, we've invested some time, obviously, and financial obligation as well. Hired Shannon, of course. So, we're trying to be a good partner with the city as well, and certainly don't want to do anything that would be detrimental to all the success that has taken place down there. I think this would just be a great addition.
Sure.
Thank you.
Shannon, have you been involved with any of the other cities in Ohio that have implemented Adora?
I haven't helped them create Adora. We're working with one other community to do that right now. But I have worked in other communities, yes, that have Adora. And we met with 3 communities that have Adora as we were doing this process. We met with Middletown, Ohio, which is one of the first Doras, as well as Worthington and Hilliard, to talk to them about their Doras. And then we've also researched Defiance, Ohio, which actually has a really great program. They're kind of the ones that gave us that idea of stickers on the door about disposing, not disposing, things like that. But pretty much everyone I've talked to that has Adora is incredibly happy with it, thinks that it really enhances their business district. And almost every community that I also set up special improvement districts. We set up the Newark Special Improvement District, and all the communities I'm working in right now setting up special improvement districts have decided that if they don't already have Adora, they would also like Adora. So I think it's becoming very popular for these small businesses to have kind of a lifeline during COVID.
Okay. All right. Mr. Barker, you have some questions.
Well, I have another question on the proposed boundary. It looks like, are we able to, I think, and Sherry, you might know about this from an email earlier today. Are we able to add the skylight in on there? Because in my research, it looked like they would be the sole left liquor license holder that would not be in the Dora. And if we're going to do the downtown district, I think we need to do all of the downtown liquor license holders. So are you able to amend that in the application, or is that something we need to amend when it goes to the council floor?
And if I could add on to that before you answer that question, another establishment that is, I think, in the Adora area, but not listed as the Works Deli. So if you guys can address both of those.
Is the Works Deli McKenna's, or is that different?
Oh, it's different. It's the Works Deli. It's on South.
It is on, yeah.
Yeah, so we are looking
across
up,
the street from the parking garage on Second.
we are looking up both of those liquor licenses. I believe, let me look at this application. I know that McKenna's is on here as a dining, so not all dining establishments that offer liquor have the correct, or offer alcohol, have the correct liquor permit to be a Adora participant, because that is done by Ohio Revised Code, is who said, you know, what permits we can use. So we are looking up both those permits and seeing if we can include them and see why they weren't included. If they are not allowed selling the beverages, at the very least, they are allowed allowing folks to, you know, come in and out of their establishment during events, which I know is not, you know, exactly what everyone wants to hear. But yes, we will look at both those establishments. And I don't want to speak for Sherry and Fred, but I believe that we're open to changing the boundary to include the skylight. My question would be back to Mr. Sasson of if we can, you know, change that for the second hearing or not, or for the second count, if we can change that during the council process.
Go ahead, Mr. Sasson.
Yeah, just procedurally, the application wouldn't need to change. Nothing from the presentation would need to change. If there was a desire to change the boundary to include additional establishments, that would be based on the assumption that they're holding a qualified permit. All you would need to do, since I put those exhibits attached to the legislation today, if it moves out of council today, when we get to voting on this, an amendment from the floor of council to amend whichever the applicable exhibit is to include an additional permit holder would be the way to do it. We wouldn't have to go back and start all over again with changing the application. It could simply be an amendment on the floor of council.
All right, thank you. Further questions? Ms. Sherry?
So would that be done when council was actually voting on it, not tonight? Is that correct, Doug?
That's my preference. I always prefer amendments to be made on the floor of council rather than in committee. Everybody a chance to weigh in. In this case, also gives council the opportunity to interact with yourself and with Shannon to determine, are these qualified permit holders? Is there a reason to change this boundary or not if they're not a qualified permit holder? And then when we come back for the vote, personally, I just think it's cleaner that we do it at council and not tonight.
Doug, I do have a question for you. I didn't look at this earlier because I assumed it was already there. But this has not come to us in this committee meeting with the emergency clause. Can we amend that here so that we change that to have an emergency clause?
You could do that at council also, or you could do it now. I suppose to add the emergency clause, contrary to what I just said 30 seconds ago, I'd probably rather have you do that in committee, because then when you come to council on the agenda, the community and all the council members are on notice in advance. This can be addressed as an emergency. So honestly, I'd prefer that type of an amendment be done to.
That would be my preference, is that we do pass this through committee with the emergency clause. Mr. Lang.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I had a question about the southern border and a little bit of a discrepancy I see between the two maps. I guess I'm not sure which, I'm assuming the proposed boundary on the red outline map controls and not the orange map. One of the areas I saw in the southern area, thinking back to when the canal market opened and when we had the Clydesdales in, we kind of had a pretty big gathering there on East Walnut Street in front of the foundations. And I guess I'd question whether we'd want the boundary to extend to the other side of Walnut to include that that area there just north of the train tracks.
John, you're talking the foundations buildings, is that correct?
Yeah, correct.
Not a permit holder.
Not a permit holder, but when we talk about the boundary for where we could hold a future event and where that would all be permitted, right? It would need to be extended to the other side of Walnut, or we wouldn't be able to continue the gathering to that side of the street, right?
That gathering would be an F2 permit, which you kind of, we opened up that whole boundary for a fundraiser charitable event. So that was all, if you're talking about the Clydesdale and Summerfest, I think it was called, we outlined and designated that space on the license for the F2 permit, temporary permit for that area. So.
But then did that?
But you would still need.
Hold on.
Sorry.
Jonathan, if you can hold on a second, Shannon.
Yeah, go ahead.
Comment about that?
Yeah, so you would still need it to have Adora beverage on that area, Fred. We would need to extend that boundary down a little bit because what would happen is that your F2 would be active in that area, but that F2 you wouldn't be able. You would almost have kind of two boundaries happening at once. So if that is an area where you want to have that F2 going on at the same time as the Dora, then we should extend it. If you don't want Dora beverages to be able to be in that charity event, then we should keep it how it is, if that makes sense.
I would think that we would want it for the F2 holders only, just because it's a fundraiser. But that's the group's decision on this. That's my thought on it.
Just to expand on that, I know Sherry had mentioned to me earlier, the opportunity to have an F2 permit is for a non-charitable organization. And we want people, if they're buying beverages, we want people buying beverages from the F2 permit holder, the non-charitable organization, not some other place, and bringing them into there.
That's the way I view it too, Jeff.
Mr. Sasson, you had a comment.
There's a specific provision in in the Ohio Revised Code for F-class permit holders, so that when they have a special event, they can, which is, an F permit is just a 1 day or a 2 day permit, they can file an application to be included for that specific event in the DORA. So it wouldn't require you to extend the size of the DORA. The application filed by the F permit holder would essentially be asking on this temporary basis to be included in that DORA for those purposes. So the circumstance that Mr. Lang brought up would be addressed, even if they're outside of this designation that we're creating now. When they apply for F2 permit and they get that, they can apply for purposes of that event to be considered in this DORA.
Thank you.
All right, do we have any other questions? Questions, comments, or concerns from anyone, Mr. Barker?
I'm good, Mr. Chair.
All right, I will entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman, do you need a,
Mr. Bob?
Mr. Chairman, do you need a motion for the emergency clause, correct?
No, we need a motion to adopt first. Or
Okay.
I mean, a motion to pass it on to council first. That needs to be first and seconded, and then we'll entertain a motion to change the emergency.
I will offer a motion to pass this on to full council.
I'll second that.
First by Bob. We have a second by Barker.
And Mr. Chairman, I'll offer a motion to add the emergency clause to this.
Thank you. We have a motion
Second.
from Mr. Bub to add the emergency clause to this. I heard somebody say second. That would be Mr.
Me.
Barker. Mr. Sassen.
I'm going to add the emergency clause. I need to have some basis for what the emergency clause is being added for.
So the whole idea of adding Adora is for the morale, welfare, and better being of the businesses in the Dora area. The reason I'm doing this is because this is basically an economic stimulus type of plan. And I think the sooner we create an opportunity for our downtown businesses to expand their offerings and increase their revenue, the more likely they are to be able to survive this COVID pandemic and all the other hoopla that's been going on with it. You can feel free to use your legalese and write that any way that you want, Mr. Sassen, but that's my thoughts for what they're worth. Is that fair enough?
Fair enough.
Thank you. So all those in favor of the amendment, adding the emergency clause, signify with thumbs up. Okay, that'll pass 5-0. Are there any other questions, comments, or concerns on this before I call for a vote to pass this on to council?
Mr. Chair, I just have a procedural question for Director Sassen.
Go ahead, Mr. Barker.
Doug, you had mentioned that when we were discussing the skylight and amending that on the council floor, and then you said adding the emergency clause, you said I would retract what I said 30 seconds later. Do we need now in committee to do an amendment or no?
No, my comment was simply that I prefer that your changes, whether it's for that they be made at council, it's
Okay.
just the emergency clause at committee. And then if you just email those to me, I'll draft them, incorporate them, and then submit them to Janine as a 20-59-A.
Thank you.
I agree. I don't think the optics of changing something from a standard legislation to an emergency legislation in council at this on the spot is necessarily a good thing to do. So at least this gives us forewarning. Yes, Shannon. Shannon, you're still muted.
Thank you. I'm using my phone and computer, which is always an issue. Do we need to have this all ready for council at 7 p.m. tonight, or is this going to be for the next council hearing?
Good question. No, this has to wait for 2 weeks or until our next council meeting, which is not necessarily 2 weeks. I'll see if I can pull up a calendar here real quick.
It's 3 weeks.
3 weeks.
Yeah, it'll be the first Tuesday in September, which will be September 1st. So that is actually, no, I'm sorry.
It'll be the 8th.
The first Monday in September, which will be September 7th, but is that Labor Day?
Yeah, it'll be Tuesday, September 8th.
So it will be Tuesday, September 8th. Thank you, Mr. Harris. All right, any other questions, comments, or concerns? Seeing none, all of those in favor of passing this on to council signify with a thumbs up. All opposed, same sign. This will proceed to council with a vote of 5-0. Shannon, Emily, Sherry, Fred, I really appreciate your time and effort in putting this together, and thank you for indulging us with all of our questions. And we'll do this again in 3 weeks. All right, up next.
Thank you.
We will consider ordinance number 20.
Jeff. Sherry's got something to say.
Yeah,
Sherry, go ahead.
Sorry, just a brief question then. So you don't need any of us to stay on or get on for the council call tonight? Just wait until the next 3 weeks?
You could absolutely stay on as long as you like, but we will not be discussing that issue any further. So I see no reason for you to punish yourself. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right. All right, up next, ordinance number 20-27, an ordinance enacting amendments to the Newark sewer use and sewer charges ordinance 91-59, directing limited publication of the sewer use and sewer charges ordinance. I'm assuming Mr. Loomis will be speaking on that.
Yeah, this is an ordinance, as you know, we've talked about the approval of our long-term control plan. We did get that from Ohio EPA. The one thing that came out of that, and there's several reasons why we want to try to bump the rates a little bit as we look into the future is what we need to do. We ended up with a pretty good plan, but we ended up, what EPA wanted to do was to bump up the time frame in which we did area number 4, which is a massive area north of Route 16, along State Route 13, which includes then Rugg Avenue, Jefferson Road, Fairfield Avenue, and Mao Street. And all that work would need to get done prior to 2028. When we look at trying to get that work done, and we look at the sort of the expanded amount of work that they want us to do, and looking at our current projects, we feel like we're going to need some more money to do that work in the future. This is not a rate we're proposing to be increased this year or even next year. It's a rate to be increased in 2022, but it would help us with our financing of this project in the future because the design, this is such a large project. This is probably going to be at least a 2-year design project and probably a 4 or 5 year construction project. So we need to get started here fairly quickly. And that's why we're working on rate structures again right now to try and get this put in place. So what we are proposing, we currently now have a 2.3% rate increase every year until the year 2029. We're proposing to increase that by 3% in 2022, 3.7% in 2023, 3.2% in 2024, and 4.7% in 2028. The options here, this is as kind of as flat as we can make these raises and still get the money we need to get this work done. Our goal is to try to keep the yearly increase as low as possible. I mean, one of the options is to do nothing and wait till we need the money and then have a fairly large rate increase. I'm not in favor of that, and we're trying not to do that. Anyway, that's where we're at. I gave you you should all have a council package on that, on why we're, with all the reasons and stuff we're doing that. We did get one project, the wastewater plant, moved up a little bit on us because of some repairs down there. It's a fairly large project as well, which caused us some problems. And then the Thornwood Drive area is another issue we have to deal with. Looks like there's going to be some sewer costs out there as well. So all that kind of accumulated. The big thing was moving up the Route 16 area, what we call area number 4 work. And but then a few other things, plus the stormwater utility getting maxed out on its debt limit also didn't help either. So that's what our proposal, and that's what this is. I guess if you got any questions, I can take those questions. Again, this is mandated work. This is not something we're just doing because we like to do it. This is a requirement of the Ohio EPA and US EPA. It's a mandate for us to reduce our CSOs. And I will say that area that they moved up, the reason they moved that up is because we do get water in basement up there. So when it floods, some of those houses do get water in their basement, and we need to take care of those issues. Was a big issue with Ohio EPA. So
I understand these cost increases are necessary, and I like the idea that we're stretching it out over a period of time. I'm sure the increases on a household will be fairly insignificant and almost unrecognizable. Am I correct in saying that?
A minimum user will see about 37 cents a month rate increase starting in 2023. Overall, in
How is this going to affect our businesses, our heavy users?
It's basically going to be well, it's 3, 10, about 10 or 15% increase. I mean, there's big users use different amounts. I can't give you each one. I could go through and give all of our big ones. This is still going to leave us at the lowest in the lower 25 percentile of the state for our rates as we're projecting that out, which is one of our goals. So we still have fairly low rates. We're lower than everybody else in the area. at the end of in 2028, of course, which is of course 8 years from now, an average user is going to see just roughly about a $5 a month increase in their bill. Of course, that's 8 years from now. Less than $1 a year. If you project it out that way, it's not going to affect anything in the first 2 years. But this is how we can flatten that increased number down as low as possible, but kind of keeping it even. So.
All right. Any other questions for anybody?
Mr. Chair, I'd offer a motion.
Motion by Barker,
I'll second that.
seconded by Bub. Any questions, comments, or concerns from anybody around? Seeing none, all of those signify by thumbs up. All opposed, same sign. That will be pushed on to council with a vote of 5-0. Thank you, Mr. Loomis. At this time, gentlemen, I believe this is the first time we've ever had to do this, and I apologize if it's my fault, but it is 6:58, and we have a council meeting that's going to start at 7 o'clock. So we will adjourn the service committee meeting. We will reconvene at the conclusion of city council. Streets committee will be following the conclusion of the service committee.
So I will be sending out to everyone right now an updated meeting for after council.
Thank you, Mr. Barker. So we'll be ending this meeting. We need to log back on to the council meeting. Is that correct?
Everyone will get a new invite for the continuation of the committee meetings.
I'm asking about
yes.
the council meeting at 7 o'clock. We need to
yes, everyone will need to log out of this meeting and log into that one. Yes, sir.